have a goal of finishing that by the end of the year.
And is that the first book in the series?
That's going to be the first book in that series.
Can you tell everybody what you've maybe written so far?
Where
you think this is going with all of your outlines?
Yeah. So I'm kind of twisting it on its head a little bit. Yeah, for one thing, Arthur is going to be the main antagonist. Morgana Le Fay is going to be the main protagonist. It's still going to have a lot of the same elements of, the knights and Merlin and, Mordred and like all of those things. But I'm adding a Fey element to the story that's much more than what we've gotten in the past. If a lot of what I'm doing is based on like the Vulgate cycle or Le Mort to Arthur, things like that. But one of the major concepts is, we have Morgan, right, or Morgana, who always had the suffix Le Fay, even though she was Arthur's sister, right? And so in my head, and I had this rolling around in my head for years and years and years, and I never really wrote it down. I never thought I would be published, and I never thought I'd, so there's that too.
The point, yeah.
Yeah. But I always felt that Arthur deserves so much more, like the stories deserve so much more. And then as I was, doing studies and stuff on a lot of ancient literature and things, and even culture, you come to find that there's a lot of common threads about women, particularly, right? Where if they're intelligent or they show any kind of gifted anything, they're witches all of a sudden, right? And what I wanted to do was tell one of these stories from her perspective, right? She's not a witch, even if she has magical abilities, which I'm playing with, right? But that doesn't mean that they're evil. That doesn't make them a bad person, And so that's where Arthur gets flipped into the antagonist. That's where he becomes, in essence, the villain. And so it's a perspective shift, right? But it also kind of functions in other ways. I'm trying to tell a story of mankind trying to come out of the shadow of the Fae. For so long, they were always in the shadow of the Fae, and now all of those fairy creatures and stuff, they're trying to fight back. They're trying to maintain some type of home, and so there's a push-pull going on between the world of man and the world of the mystical, and Morgan is caught in the middle of it, and so she becomes kind of the bridge between the two worlds. She's Morgan Le Fay. Le Fay literally means of the Fae, and so because of her lineage, because of what she comes from, and I'll include all of that in there, but because of where she comes from, she becomes that bridge, and so it's going to be a huge undertaking.
What do you love most about writing?
I think for me, it's probably the catharsis. It's the way I release. I tell people I don't like to dig into like tragic backstories and stuff, but I had a rough childhood, and the way I dealt with it at some point was, yeah, sure, the poetry may have started out as love poetry and it was terrible stuff, but it was also at some point I started writing just to kind of get thoughts out and get whatever it was, to actually start dealing with things. And so yeah, around the time I was 19 or so, that's really what I started doing, is I just started writing all of that crap out, all of it, and it wasn't all good, of course, but it was a release. Yeah. I felt that release, and so it helped me deal with it in a very real sense. And since then, I've incorporated those elements into all of my stories. You'll see different things in all of those, especially if you know me well. You can really find it. So, um,
Where are the books available? Where can people buy them?
you can pick them up through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Walmart.com. I don't think they're in store right now. I'm working on that though.
So how
So
does that feel to like be able to say that? Does it feel weird?
it does.
Yeah.
It does. It's been yeah, it's been a few years, and I'm still in shock a lot of times. I hope I never get used to it, because I don't ever want to just be like, yeah, I'm this arrogant author or whatever. I always want to just be reminded that this is the coolest thing ever. Because it is. It's so cool. I absolutely love it. You know, when my daughters are bragging about me at school or something, and I'm just like, that's so cool. This is awesome.
They're not complaining about me.
They're actually loving it. And I'm like, oh, this is all right. I could get used to this. But yeah, I think, and I talk about this with other, fellow authors and stuff too. It's so strangely unique to be in such a small group of people. I'm like, I feel like I've accomplished something that so few get to. I mean, I've technically finished a series now, even though there's more coming in that world. That part of the story is done, and so I'm like, okay, so I started with just a novella, and that literally just blew up into this massive world, and yeah, I can't get used to it.
To me, like the thought of writing an entire book, and to a lot of people probably sounds very daunting. And like I remember I've like started to write books before when I was younger, and I would have notebooks and I would write every day. And then I would be like, oh my god, this is going to take forever. I don't have time. What's your advice to people, either in general for like writing, or people who want to get into actually becoming authors?
Get plugged into some type of group where they're going to push you. Develop a thick skin. And then read. Read everything. Everything you can get your hands on. Read. Study how other people have approached the art. Study how they do it in nonfiction. Study how they do it in fiction. Study dialogue. Study the way that something is described. I tell people often that my main inspiration for description comes from Anne Rice, the late, great Anne Rice. Absolutely a phenomenal person, amazing author. I feel like her descriptions, they weren't over the top like some people's, but they were incredibly beautiful. What she was able to accomplish in her descriptions, just painted pictures that were beyond words, right? And I think that that's every author's dream, is to kind of be able to do that. But we all have our own voice. And so as we study more styles, as we look at different authors and read different things and just apply as we're learning, we grow from that and we become even more of ourselves. We are incorporating other voices or other ideas into our own style. And it becomes something else. It becomes, your own. And that's what we want. We want to find our own voice.
Robert, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Make sure you go to Amazon and get his books, and he'll be back hopefully at the end of the year.